The morning Oma called her husband boring, she had no idea her best friend was hiding a black eye behind designer sunglasses. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The teacup trembled in Oma's hand as she stared at the glowing screen, her breath catching in her throat. The red SUV in the photo seemed to mock her from every pixel, its giant white bow reflecting sunlight she couldn't feel through her own dimming windows. "Morning, love." Kojo's voice drifted from the dining table, gentle as always, steady as the man himself. Oma didn't respond. She couldn't. Her eyes were still fixed on Elsie's post, on the caption that felt like a knife twisting slowly into her chest. "When love speaks, it shines. Anniversary gift from my king. Crown Red Heart Automobile." She scrolled past it quickly, but the damage was already done. The image had burned itself into her mind, joining the collection of other perfect moments she'd been gathering like poison for months now. Elsie at a beach resort in Dubai. Elsie with diamond earrings. Elsie wrapped in her husband's arms at some candlelit restaurant. Oma. Kojo stood now, briefcase in hand, concern creasing his forehead. "Are you alright?" "I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. He moved closer, his hand reaching for her shoulder, but she shifted away slightly. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but they both felt it. The distance between them had been growing for weeks, maybe months, like a crack in a wall that nobody wanted to acknowledge until it became too wide to ignore. "I'll be home by 6, Kojo said quietly. He leaned down to kiss her forehead, a ritual he'd maintained since their wedding day 5 years ago. Oma stood rigid, not pulling away but not leaning in either. His lips touched her skin briefly, and then he was gone. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Oma returned to her phone immediately, her tongue moving with practiced precision through Instagram stories and Facebook posts. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone except her. The Asante couple down the street had just finished renovating their house. Another friend had posted photos from her birthday yacht cruise. And there was Elsie again, this time in a video, squealing with delight as her husband Kwesi presented the car keys with a theatrical flourish. "God, when will it be my turn?" Oma whispered to the empty kitchen. She looked around her living room with fresh eyes trained by comparison to see only lack. The handmade curtains her mother had sewn suddenly looked cheap. The television, only 3 years old, seemed ancient compared to the flat screens in other people's homes. Even the couch where she and Kojo had spent countless evenings felt inadequate now, its fabric worn in places from their bodies settling into familiar positions. When had everything become so small? The memories came unbidden, flooding back with cruel clarity. University of Ghana, Legon Campus, 2015. She and Elsie had been inseparable then, two girls with matching dreams stitched from the same cloth of youthful optimism. They'd spent hours in their dorm room planning their futures, mapping out the lives they'd live with the men they'd marry. "I want someone who'll surprise me," Elsie had declared, painting her toenails bright red. "Someone who knows how to make grand gestures." "I just want someone kind," Oma had replied, braiding her hair in the mirror. "Someone who'll be there when I need him." They'd both gotten what they wished for, hadn't they? So why did Elsie's wish suddenly seem so much better than hers? The comparison had started innocently enough. A like here, a comment there. But social media was a patient teacher, and Oma had learned its lessons well. She'd learned to measure her life not by what she had but by what others displayed. She'd learned to weigh her husband not by his character but by his gestures. She'd learned to value the performance of love over its quiet, daily practice. Last Sunday's lunch at Elsie's house had been the breaking point, though Oma hadn't realized it at the time. Kwesi had made a show of presenting Elsie with a diamond bracelet in front of all their friends, his voice booming across the table. "For the most beautiful woman in Ghana," he'd announced, fastening the jewelry around Elsie's wrist with exaggerated care. Everyone had applauded. Elsie had blushed and laughed, her hand sparkling under the chandelier light. And Kojo had simply smiled politely, continuing to eat his jollof rice in that calm, unobtrusive way of his. Amma had felt her face burning. Not from joy, but from something darker. Shame, maybe. Or anger. Why couldn't Kojo be more like that? Why couldn't he make grand gestures? Why was he always so quiet, so reserved, so utterly ordinary? She'd barely spoken to him on the drive home that day. And when he'd asked if something was wrong, she'd said no with a tone that clearly meant yes. Now, standing in her kitchen with the morning light painting shadows across the floor, Amma felt that anger returning. It had been building for weeks, fed by every perfect post, every comparison, every moment when Kojo failed to meet expectations he didn't even know existed. The day dragged on with excruciating slowness. Amma cleaned the house mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She cooked dinner without tasting it, her thoughts consumed by images of red SUVs and diamond bracelets. By the time Kojo arrived home at 6:15, she was standing at the sink washing dishes with aggressive energy, her jaw clenched tight. "Good evening, my wife." Kojo's greeting was warm despite the coolness he'd been feeling from her lately. "Evening." Amma didn't turn around. He set his briefcase down, loosened his tie, and approached the sink cautiously. "Can I help?" "I'm almost done." Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Kojo shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing how to begin. Finally, he spoke. "Amma, have I done something wrong?" The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. "Why would you ask that?" Amma scrubbed the plate harder than necessary. "Because you've been distant. For weeks now. I feel like you're pulling away from me, and I don't understand why. Maybe because you don't do anything." The words erupted before she could stop them. "When was the last time you surprised me with anything, Kojo? When was the last time you took me somewhere special or bought me something just because?" Kojo blinked, genuinely confused. I make sure all the bills are paid. I fix things around the house. Fixing a light bulb isn't romance." Amma spun around, soapy water dripping from her hands. "Do you know what Kwesi gave Elsie for their anniversary?" "A car, Kojo. A brand new car." Understanding dawned slowly on Kojo's face, followed quickly by hurt. "So that's what this is about? You want me to be like Kwesi? I want you to show me that you care. I want to feel special, not like just another responsibility on your list. Amma, everything I do is because I love you." His voice cracked slightly. "Every morning I wake up and go to work, every evening I come home, every decision I make, it's all for us. For our future. Love isn't enough." The words came out as a shout, and immediately Amma regretted their volume if not their sentiment. Everyone else's husbands are doing things, posting things, showing off their wives, and what do? You sit there reading the news. You're boring, Kojo. Our whole life is boring. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Kojo stared at his wife as if seeing a stranger, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I had no idea you felt that way." He turned and walked to their bedroom, closing the door with a gentleness that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. Amma stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding, her hands still wet with dishwater, wondering why victory felt so much like defeat. The next few days passed in a fog of cold politeness. Kojo stopped trying to initiate conversations. He left for work earlier and came home later. When they were in the same room, they moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the choreography, careful not to touch, careful not to look too closely. Amma told herself she didn't care. She threw herself into social media with renewed energy, posting carefully filtered selfies with captions designed to suggest a life more glamorous than the one she was living. "Soft life loading nail polish sparkles," she wrote beneath a photo taken in good lighting. God's favorite folded hands red heart, she captioned another, wearing lipstick she'd bought specifically for the picture. The likes came quickly, little dopamine hits that felt good for approximately 30 seconds before the emptiness returned. She followed more couples' accounts, watched more romantic proposal videos, absorbed more evidence of her own inadequacy. One evening, while Kojo was reading in the bedroom, Elsie called with excitement bubbling through the phone. Oma, we're having a small gathering at the house this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just drinks and music. You and Kojo should come. Kojo's been very busy with work, Oma said automatically. But I'll be there. Without your husband. Elsie's tone was teasing. Independent woman, I see. Oma laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. He won't mind. Saturday evening arrived wrapped in the golden light of a cross-approaching sunset. Oma dressed carefully, choosing a fitted dress that showed off her figure, applying makeup with precision. She didn't tell Kojo where she was going, just that she'd be out for a few hours. He looked up from his laptop briefly. Okay. Be safe. That was it. No questions, no protest, no After Elsie left, escorted to her mother's house by Omar's insistence, Omar sat alone in her living room and let everything crash over her. The truth, ugly and undeniable, that she'd nearly destroyed her marriage chasing an illusion. That she'd poisoned her own peace with comparison. That she'd mistaken quiet love for lack of love, steady care for indifference, peace for boredom. She thought of Kojo locked in their bedroom, hurt by words he didn't deserve. She thought of 5 years of kindness she'd taken for granted. She thought of a man who fixed light bulbs and paid bills and came home every evening, who wasn't flashy or dramatic but was there, always there, steady as sunrise. The tears came then, hot and bitter, full of regret and recognition. She'd almost lost her treasure because she mistook silence for emptiness, because she valued performance over presence, because she let other people's highlights become the lowlights of her own life. That night, Oma couldn't sleep. She lay awake planning, preparing, trying to find words for apologies that seemed too small for the damage she'd caused. When dawn finally crept through the curtains, she rose with purpose. The kitchen became her confessional. She cooked the way her grandmother had taught her, with intention and love, each gesture an act of repentance. Fried yam, golden and crisp. Pepper stew, rich and fragrant. Fresh avocado sliced carefully. Orange juice squeezed by hand. She set the table like it was their first meal together, arranging everything with care that had been missing for months. When Kojo emerged from the bedroom, his eyes were tired, guarded. He'd built walls in the night, and Oma could see them clearly now. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice catching. He stopped, surprised by the tone, by the food, by her presence. "Good morning. I made breakfast. Your favorite." She gestured to the table, suddenly nervous. "Will you sit with me?" Kojo hesitated, then slowly pulled out a chair. They sat across from each other, the table both barrier and bridge. Amma watched him look at the food, saw confusion and caution warring on his face. "Kojo, She stopped, started again. "Elsie came here yesterday." She told him everything. About Elsie's bleeding lip, about the years of abuse, about the lies behind the perfect post. She told him about the car that was really an apology for a black eye, about the diamonds that covered bruises, about the performance of happiness that hid years of pain. "I've been such a fool," Oma said, her voice shaking. "I compared our peace with their performance. I looked at glitter and didn't see it was covering blood. I wanted what they had because I couldn't see what I already had." Kojo listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. "You called me boring," he said finally. "You said love wasn't enough. I was wrong." Tears spilled down Oma's cheeks. "I was so wrong, Kojo. You're not boring, you're steady. You're not unromantic, you're real. Every morning when you kiss my forehead, every evening when you come home, every light bulb you fix and every bill you pay, that's love. That's real love, not performance. And I threw it away because it didn't look good on Instagram. Oma. I'm sorry." The words burst out of her. "I'm so sorry for comparing you, for making you feel inadequate, for not seeing your value until I almost lost it. You deserve better than what I've been giving you. You deserve gratitude, not criticism. Appreciation, not comparison. Love, not resentment." She stood, moved around the table, and knelt beside his chair. "Kojo, thank you. Thank you for staying when I pushed you away. Thank you for coming home every evening even when I was cold. Thank you for being the kind of man who fixes things instead of breaking them. Thank you for being boring and steady and safe, because those are the things that matter. Those are the things that last." Kojo looked down at his wife, at her tear-stained face, at the breakfast she'd prepared, at the woman he'd loved through her worst behavior. Something in his face softened, the walls beginning to crack. "I'm not perfect either," he said quietly. "Maybe I could be more expressive. Maybe I could show you more often how much you mean to me. You show me every day. Omar took his hand. I just stopped looking. He pulled her up slowly, into his arms, and she collapsed against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the kitchen while the fried yam grew cold, rebuilding what had nearly broken, choosing each other again. Some people post perfection, Omar whispered against his shirt. But others live through patience. I almost lost my treasure because I mistook silence for lack of love. Kojo pulled back to look at her face. And I almost gave up because I thought I wasn't enough. You're more than enough. You're everything. They ate breakfast together, really together, for the first time in months. They talked about Elsie, about social media, about the ways comparison kills contentment. They talked about building a marriage that valued substance over show, depth over display, real connection over public performance. No more comparing, Omar promised. No more silence, Kojo agreed. Outside their window, Accra was waking up, the city stirring to life with its usual chaos and beauty. Inside their small house with its handmade curtains and aging television, two people were learning to see each other again, to value what they had instead of longing for what they didn't. 6 months later, Oma stood in her kitchen, the same kitchen where everything had almost fallen apart, watching Kojo fix the cabinet door that had been squeaking for weeks. There, he said, testing the hinge. Good as new. She smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep contentment rather than performance. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Another Instagram notification. She glanced at it briefly, someone's vacation photos, then set it down without scrolling. You didn't even look, Kojo observed, wiping his hands on a cloth. I'm looking at what matters, Omar replied, walking over to him. They'd been working on their marriage, both of them. Kojo had started surprising her with small gestures, flowers on random Wednesdays. Handwritten notes in her lunch bag, spontaneous evening walks. Not because she'd asked, but because he wanted to show his love in ways she could feel. And Omar had learned to see the love that was already there. In the fixed hinges and paid bills. In the steady presence and reliable care. In the man who came home every evening, not with grand gestures, but with consistency that built trust brick by brick. She deleted most of her social media apps. Not all of them, she wasn't trying to disappear, but enough to break the addiction to comparison. When she did post now, it was real moments, unfiltered. Her kitchen with its handmade curtains. Kojo reading on the couch. The ordinary, beautiful life they were building together. How's Elsie? Kojo asked, as he often did. Getting stronger. She filed for divorce last month. She's staying with her mother, started therapy. Kojo nodded. They'd both supported Elsie through the hardest months, Omar with presence and Kojo with quiet practical help, changing locks, recommending a good lawyer, being there without judgment. She told me something yesterday, Omar continued. She said watching us heal gave her courage to live. She said if we could choose honesty over image, she could too. Kojo pulled Eme close, kissing the top of her head. We're not perfect, he said. No, Omar agreed. But we're real. And we're here. And that's enough. Through the window, the Accra sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, people were posting their highlight reels, curating their perfect lives, performing for audiences they'd never meet. But here, in this small house with its fixed hinges and handmade curtains, two people had chosen something different. They'd chosen substance over show. Truth over trend. Presence over performance. And in a world obsessed with perfection, that was the most radical choice of all. If you've ever caught yourself scrolling through someone else's perfect life, and feeling like yours doesn't measure up, I hope Omar's story reminded you of something important. You never know what's behind the highlight reel. That perfect post might be hiding pain. That grand gesture might be covering guilt. That sparkling life might be gilded loneliness. Real love doesn't always look good in photos. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's ordinary. Sometimes it looks like someone coming home in the rain, fixing a squeaky hinge, or just being there day after day after day. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found yourself comparing your relationship to what you see online? What helped you shift your perspective? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And remember, the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. Peace isn't boring. Peace is precious.